as we find our origin stories, as we find that essential vibration that sustains us, we gain a power, an inner power, a force that allows us to lead ourselves in the world and support others in their leadership so that we can all grow together, we all evolve, and my success becomes your success, and vice versa. And I think this is the true definition of service. But my story growing up has always, I've never really talked about it. This is my first time.
Hello, everybody. I am so excited to have you here today. I have an amazing guest. I am so grateful that she's chosen to come on today and to share her story. And I'm really excited to share with you all what she's doing today and how she's really helping to impact the world in an amazing way. We have Inely Cesna. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. It's awesome to be here with you. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let me tell you guys a little bit about Inely. So Inely holds a doctorate in spiritual science, a master's degree in spiritual psychology, and a Juris Doctor in law. Inely is the founder of the Institute of Next Level Leadership and an international coach facilitating the development and practice of inner leadership and self-awareness. And I also want to mention that she is an author as well as a mother and many other incredible things. So her first book that came out, Critical Access, is an amazing book. But I want to talk a little bit about your most recent book that you just released, The Naked Truth, My Journey with Divine Intimacy. Ooh, that sounds a little spicy.
It is spicy, very spicy.
I love it. Can you tell me a little bit about, like, what does divine intimacy mean to you?
Yes, I mean, that's what's so spicy about it. It's like how to be intimate with the divine. I think part of being human, at least my life, has been trying to find that intimacy with everyone else. My family, my parents, my friends, my boyfriends, my husbands. I had two of them. I still have one. My husbands, so trying to connect with people in a way that offered me that embrace that somewhat I longed for. And even with my children, there's always been that idea of being intimate with them, but no one outside of me could really provide that embrace to the extent that I wished. I think part of being human is that inevitably we will disappoint one another at some point. And be it my children, my husbands, my parents, whoever, they will disappoint us. That's for sure. And for me, every time I was disappointed, it's like, oh, there you go. The intimacy is not here. And so I started on a journey of what does intimacy really mean? And I recognize it's not out here in this world. It's got to be someplace else. And that took me into this journey of where is it? And how do I know I have it? What does it feel like having it? So that's been part of the exploration. And one interesting idea on divine intimacy that I want to leave it here for you and with everyone else is this idea of implicit memory of belonging. I quit my career as a lawyer to become a mother full time, and I have no regrets. It's a tremendous journey. It's been a tremendous journey, 19 years, almost 20 years of being a mother. But what I learned so much in motherhood. And one thing I learned is about this implicit memory. All of us, no exception, all of us, we have lied inside of a womb for 9 months. Okay, we were formed inside this womb for 9 months. And so for 9 months, we have been imprinted with an implicit memory of holding something beyond us, something beyond us that just cares for us. It feeds us, it protects us, it holds us, it embraces us, it loves us unconditionally because we don't have to do anything when we're in there. And then we are born. It's like, where did that go?
Wow. I'm glad you said, I've never thought about that. And it's like this radical transition in a way, right?
And we're like, where is that sensation I spent 9 months developing myself in? Wow. I remember that so deeply in my cells. And we spend our lives looking for it out here in the world. But my experience is that it's not out here in the world. And it is still there inside of us. It's been so deeply imprinted in us that we cannot forget that. It's impossible to forget it.
Wow. So on some level, what I'm hearing is we get out here in this physical world, we leave the womb, we get out here, and we have this implicit memory of all that comfort and connection and surrender in a way. What I was hearing when you were talking about is this idea of like being able to be completely vulnerable and working in cooperation with our surrounding. And then we get out here and then we start seeking that same sense, that same feeling, but with things external of ourselves out here in the world, and then struggle when that's not cooperating the way we need it to feel the way that we once felt with this implicit memory. And what I'm hearing you say in addition to that is you found that journey, that discovery came from somewhere else.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, my journey was then to go inside and look, rescue that memory within me, that memory of belonging, of loving and safety and unconditionality, serenity, and courage. I mean, think of a fetus, and it takes courage to be born. And so this whole memory was my path towards finding in my story, in my life, how am I rescuing this for myself? And I find this to be the greatest purpose of being alive. The greatest purpose of being alive is rescuing this tremendous love and belonging and safety that we know implicitly into our lives and become it in the world.
A couple of things I'm hearing that I really love. And one is, well, you're reminding me of even my own childhood and my own desires. There was and a lot of that may have been informed also by the family dynamics that I grew up in. But I always remember having this deep yearning to belong, to feel connected, to feel like I had different struggles in my family that I longed to feel like accepted, that I was worthy enough, that I belonged. And it was interesting when I think about how when I got into sports, I would have been way more successful at individual sports. However, my desire was to be part of a family, to belong. So I'd loved, especially football, just having that sense of camaraderie and connection. And then even I think about law enforcement, that same concept, the same idea of a sense of belonging to something and feeling more whole in that context of that. And then later realizing that was some healing that needed to be done in me, and learning to connect with that in a different way, not making that wrong. I guess I'm not saying that that's wrong, but it's not being dependent on that as a sense of knowing that I am those things. Yes,
exactly. I think part of it, all of it, I mean, being born is a trauma. We are leaving, this womb, the love and belonging and embrace of the womb to be born into the world. And so it's a trauma in the sense that it's a whole different medium that we are present with now.
That we have the awareness of now that we didn't, which is so interesting. I'm sorry, I'm kind of it's just what you're bringing up right now is reminding me of different things. And I remember hearing a story talked about one time of this child in a womb and that journey, and all they know is what they know that's inside the womb. That's their reality. That's their world, right? And then they're birthed into this new world, right? And it's almost like a death of that old world. And then that became, when I was hearing this, like the journey of what potentially comes next, right? After our death. And we might think like, oh, it's over, and mourning this life. And it could very well be that birth into something more, into something grander. And the miracle, and the other thing I thought of was the miracle in just being birthed to begin with. We could have, when we think about like the amount of sperm and everything that's involved in, and we were the ones that were birthed, like every single one of us are a miracle.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's the miracle of creation. And yes, I think the miracle of creation does not end with this physical life. I don't know where it goes, but I think there is a pattern here that we can recognize that is most likely going to happen again. And we're going to be born into another different medium. I don't know what that is. But to the extent that I can recognize, we call it the essential vibration in our programs, to the extent that I can recognize that essence, that implicit memory, that essence that lies within me, regardless of the medium that I am at, whether I'm inside the womb, and I know that essence that is just holding me and protecting me and loving me. And I come into this medium of physical life, and I can recognize that essence again, that it's holding me, that it's protecting me, that it's embracing me. Hopefully I'll take that to the next, to the next one. Right. And so it becomes the sustenance. It becomes what holds me together here. And that's what I call divine intimacy.
So this essence that you speak of, and it was, I'm sorry, essential vibration?
Yes,
that's the term you coined it, yes. It, right? Essential vibration. So can you, for the viewers, somebody that's curious of like, okay, I get that concept, but how do I get in tune with that? How do I reconnect with that? How do I differentiate that from everything else that I'm hearing, the noise that maybe they're caught up into? I imagine a lot of the work that you do involves with reconnecting with that essential vibration.
Exactly. I mean, in fact, the journey of reconnecting with essential vibration, we call it leadership. And we can talk more about leadership later, but I want to mention that essential vibration is a term we coined because we find it to be neutral. It has no religious context. It's just a neutral term. But there is essential vibration it's the same thing as so many other terms that are out there. I mean, Christ consciousness, or the Buddha within, or the soul, or traveler. There's so many different terms that we have used to describe this inner force.
And I love that neutrality because it's been my experience through the journey. So often, our ego, our mind can get caught up in the semantics of, yes. I don't know if, I agree with this or that. And it's like, it just things that paralyze us from moving forward and bringing something in that neutrality. Because it's been my experience also, like, hey, it's all the same thing. We put different hats on it and dress it up, different window dressing, and it helps to resonate in different ways. But ultimately, it's all the same thing.
Yes, I'm glad you're saying that. We were talking about words before. Sometimes we get
Mhm.
hung up on words. It's not about the words. It's about the energy, what's
Yes.
sustaining that word. And so it is for us too. It's not our bodies, our looks, our thoughts, our
Right.
emotions. It's what's underneath. It's that vibrational essence that it's infusing all of it. And how do I know what it is? How do I get in contact with that? That's what the fun is all about. That's the
Totally.
journey.
And I
How
feel like that's what you're saying here with the divine intimacy. That's also what changes the relationships. I think of everything that in our life is a relationship, not just with who I'm with or with my children or my parents, but the relationship with my car or my mortgage payment or my whatever it is. Like everything in our life is a relationship, and there's ways in which we can connect and relate to that can come from more a conditioned self with a lot of agendas and thoughts attached to it. And then there's another way in which we can have relationships from a more transparent and a more authentic space, and that more loving, unconditionally loving space, which I imagine plays part in the divine intimacy.
Yeah, relationships is a huge topic. And to some extent, every relationship is a mirror of ourselves, especially the ones that disturb us, but also the beautiful ones. They are all a mirror of something inside of us. And so the ultimate relationship is the relationship with ourselves, is the relationship with this essence, the essential vibration that it's holding us here, because everything is going to somewhat reflect parts of it.
So that brings up something really interesting for me from your book. Okay, so one of the things I want to talk about with Naked Truth is first of all, I really loved the way you wrote this and designed this of different poems telling specifically about different journeys and stories in your life. And one, I mean, being someone who's dyslexic, I feel like it's a lot clearer and succinct. Is that the right term? That to reading it, it makes it made it a lot easier for me. And the other element I loved about it is it made me curious. It made me curious to know more about you and more about that particular journey and how it influenced what you said and the reflection. With reading it, it very easily helped me like reflect and connect to different aspects and parts of my own life. And it's really interesting because you talk about mirror, and there's one of the poems that you wrote, Loving Myself Fully, that I felt had to do with that mirror, that reflection of the relationships we have. Would you be open to reading that?
Absolutely.
I believe it's on page 96.
Absolutely. 96. Let me see here. Yeah. Oh, I wrote this to my husband, by the way. To my current
Nice.
husband. Yes. I think the closest the relationship, the more of a magnifying mirror of us it becomes. So I have to say my husband is my greatest teacher, my greatest mirror, and so are my children. But this one I wrote to him. And so I wrote, it took me a long time to call you a husband, to announce my love for you forever and ever. It took me a very long time to see that your addictions, your shortcomings, your misunderstandings were actually a reflection of my own. It has taken me even a longer time to see that your beauty, your wisdom, your generosity, your majesty must also be in me, must also be mine. I now know that you are my husband, not because society calls you so, but because I chose you to be my mirror, to show me the truth, all of the truth about me. And in your loving arms, learn to love myself fully. I've been married for about 20 years with Mike. And in these 20 years, this relationship has gone everywhere you can possibly think of, up and down, around. Do I want to be here? Do I not want to be here? Where do I go next? And, it has gone everywhere. And I learned that that I had to go it's almost like you're trying an exit how can I get out of this? How can I get out of this? Until you recognize that the only out is in the relationship and into myself. I had been married before, so I could see the patterns more clearly. Oh, this happened in my previous. Oh, it's happening again.
This is familiar.
Yeah, this is familiar. It's like the husbands are different, but I am. I'm the common.
Right.
Component.
The common thread. Yeah.
Yes.
He's got the same problems the last guy had. And
Hey, isn't that such a coincidence?
Oh, just.
And even it's like, oh my God, these are the problems that I had seen in my childhood. These are the problems that I had swore in my childhood. I'm never gonna live through them. Never, the links go far beyond.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've heard this before. I don't remember who said this. Like, we don't have problems. We just have childhood memories repeated back to us in different ways and stories and shapes. But
I love that.
Comes back into that.
Inely, I'd be really interested. You share a lot of stuff, and there's one thing I know you grew up in Brazil, but there's one thing I don't know a lot about, and that is your childhood and the struggles or journeys or those things that impacted what you carried forward to you and the relationships and life, and I'm sure became a huge catalyst for the work that you do now.
Yes, everything I do now refers back to that childhood. And I just want to mention something here for you and for those who are listening, the importance of our origin story, to go back to that origin story. Part of the Divine Intimacy book, the book, My Journey to Divine Intimacy, is to look back into my origin stories and make sense of it, just kind of relate back to it, see the thread underneath it all. And I call this leadership. As we find our origin stories, as we find that essential vibration that sustains us, we gain a power, an inner power, a force that allows us to lead ourselves in the world and support others in their leadership so that we can all grow together. We all evolve, and my success becomes your success, and vice versa. And I think this is the true definition of service. But my story growing up I've never really talked about it. This is my first time. In fact, it took me 4 years to publish this book. I finished writing it in 2018, and it took me 4 years of a lot of inner work. This past 4 years have been very dedicated to my work with the Enneagram and understanding the distortions and how my energy can distort itself and kind of alienate myself in order to promote a facade of peace. But what I recognize is that my opportunity is to engage, is to show up in the world with the full of who I am. And this is what the book is doing. And so going back into my childhood, for a long time, I wish I was born in the US. I wish I was an American. I was born in this land. I mean, I had my children here out of that wish because I want to give to my children what I wish I had, which was born in the US. And so it took me a long time to find the beauty in my origin. And being born in Brazil is, it's an amazing country, beautiful country, but it has its own touch and feel. I was born during the military dictatorship in Brazil, dictatorship that lasts many decades. And at the time, I never tied this to leadership until much later in my life. I didn't even knew the term leadership, growing up. But what I did know growing up was a sense of contraction, a sense of prohibition. There was a kind of a tension in the air. And I didn't know good for bad or right for wrong. That's the way it is, right? There's this tension. Living under a dictatorship is something that it's so pervasive and so it takes over so much that not only the what's happening out in the world is happening that way, but it pervades the family, the relationships within the family, the authority of the parents and the siblings. It goes down, into a very minuscule parts of our lives that it becomes normal. So it becomes normal. So when I see situations like this, even the war in the Ukraine and things like that, it just brings back to me this whole idea of how important it is for us to really be aware of the ripple effects of dictatorship and abuse of power. But I grew up with that, and part of that was a family structure of abuse. I suffered abuse for many, many years from my older brother. He was 4 years older than me. And I was beaten up every day, pretty much from the age of like 10 until 20th during my adolescence. Oh. Before that, my mom used to stay home. Then when my mom started working, things got, crazy. So I lived almost in this prison, my sister and we would lock ourselves in our room. We were beaten up every day. I was defending her. She was younger than me. So I was the one that was taking the beat for her because I didn't want her to be hurt. And so it was 10 years of terror in our everyday lives. And then, my parents were tired and then they come home. They don't want to hear from, you kids, this is just kids. And so I was ignored in that sense for most of the time. I did learn how to fight, though. I did learn how to fight. And many times I was left on the floor, wow, without being able to stand up. And I would go to school with a black and blue, thinking this is totally, I knew it was different. Not everybody was at school with a black and blue, but there was a sense of normality, a sense of like, this is the way it is. Like I couldn't recognize the abuse until much, much later in my life.
Let me ask you something off of that. So what I'm hearing you say is that when you were 10, which would have made him 14, there was a big shift that occurred where he started beating on you, both you and your sister. Yeah. So prior to that there was the younger Inely that wasn't familiar with that, and it wasn't normalized yet. Well, can you recall a specific time when that shift occurred, and the surprise, and how maybe can sink into Inely at that 10-year-old that I think was experiencing that? And
my whole life there was that tension in the air.
Okay.
That we were under the dictatorship.
Got it.
There was always this kind of alert. And I didn't know what it was, but I sensed, I knew it was present. It was just the way things were. My dad was in opposition to the government. And there were a lot of things of, we can't say those things outside. Don't talk about this at school. Or there's a lot of like secrets.
Privacy that, right. Yeah. Don't speak about this. Don't talk about this.
Yeah. And I was like if I do, what will happen if I do? I was always curious. Why not? What's going on? So there's always that that sense around. And then slowly, and I don't remember when it actually started. It wasn't like one day to another. Okay, now I'm 10 years. It starts slowly. And I think it also, I was like low in the food chain because my brother became a teenager. He became more of trouble. My mom was very authoritative. She came from a family that is authoritative. I mean, it all shared that philosophy of I'll beaten up until you change. I'll beat you up until you change. I'll torture you so you will change. So she grew up from that philosophy, and she was applying this to my brother, and my brother was being beaten up, and then he started beating me up. And then so I was just lower in the food chain. And it took me a long time too, also to recognize the inheritance that we had.
That you bring up a really interesting point about that, because so often generationally, gets passed on those those patterns, those programs. And, I'm thinking back to, my mom and my mom's Mexican and the Hispanic side, that she grew up in a very disciplined household. Also, when I say discipline, meaning you got your butt whooped if you didn't do something you're supposed to. and you're right. And you're giving me flashbacks of like how it kept getting handed down to the next person. And I had uncles that were just not much older than me, but much bigger than me, because it was, at that time, 4 years is a big difference. And yeah, you just get your butt whooped until you got used to it. And then it was someone else's. And then it becomes a time when, and I feel like my mom was one that really, in our lives, she really wanted to shift that, and change that, break that cycle. And it sounds like what you've done, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And, when I go farther back into the history, I recognize that this goes even beyond the family. It really also comes from the culture of the country. You see, Brazil, like most Latin American countries, were colonized by big, powerful nations and empires at the time. And so Brazil was like this beautiful young girl who had been raped, because the Dutch, there's many nationalities that would go into the country and take the resources, exploit the natural resources, take the resources away, and leave the country there to sort it out. There was no help in creating infrastructure or supporting. It's just like, go there, rape it up, and take the benefits of it away. And to a big extent, it still is. Even recently, I think 2014, when the economy went really big, it was all around commodities, exportation of commodities and natural resources. That's how, Brazil has been. And so that abuse goes even beyond the family, comes into this whole colonization mentality.
Which I think is an important thing, at least through my experience of healing and moving through, was not to make somebody right or wrong, but to understand because a lot of these patterns and struggles come from a survival mentality that have been passed down, and at one point was needed in order to survive. And it was the intention behind it, was which reminds me, you wrote another poem called Intention that was really interesting. But it's like part of the healing is not finding a place to place blame. It's seeking to understand. I always say empathy is an equation, and understanding the circumstances and situations and conditions that informed the result that we're seeing.
Part of me, the origin story, go back in history to see where it is. What helps me in that is to create a chain of pain. There is a chain of pain. And even when we look today to the whole social unrest regarding race, for example, in the US, and there has been so much pain in the African race, the African American race. But you go back down, that pain is in all races. It comes from that animal origin of survival, of killing to survive. And so when I recognize the chain of pain, I become more aware of how important it is for each one of us now in this time, in this age, to break that chain free. So how can I be the chain that will break free from this pain?
So what have you found to be supportive in breaking? You become aware of the chain of pain, the different links
Right.
that have tied together. That's like an exploration. And then when we want to break that, and obviously this is a journey, but if there's a simplistic thing or two you can mention that would support somebody listening, and an approach or a technique or something that they can consciously become, and often a part of it is honestly becoming consciously aware that that subconscious pattern has been running. So more we can become an observer of it, right, and become more conscious, and then that gives us the opportunity to consciously shift the way we may react or respond to it.
Yeah, well, it's just come upon me here right now. There's three important things. I mean, this breaking away is the journey of leadership. It's what we call next level leadership. And we have 3 programs around this, 2 years of studies and experience to allow us to break the chain, because, it's somewhat counterintuitive. We're coming
Right.
with all this genetic taking us in one way, and we are shifting, we are creating something new. But here is, I think, if I could summarize the whole thing in the 3 most important skills that we need to develop and that we work to develop throughout our programs. One is self-observation. We are incredibly blind to ourselves, incredibly blind. Self-observation. 2 is listening. Listening, and doesn't mean listening to others, is listening to ourselves as well as to others. It's the same, there's a mirror effect there as well. So deep listening, and being able to listen to the parts we don't want to listen to. It's uncomfortable to listen to. There's a part in the book called My Masks, which I really went into, okay, let's talk to those parts that I have avoided. And I still, do that.
That reminds me of, you ever read Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford?
Yes, you mentioned that to me before.
That's right. Yeah. I love it. And it's very similar. We both went to University of Santa Monica, and where I love that book because, we need to meet people at different spaces of where they're at to make it easier to relate to. We talked earlier about the words and the challenges that they can impose on us sometimes with working a process. So in one context of USM, learning that I am not all these things that I may judge myself as. And one of the things I really love that she speaks on is, I think of kind of any easier concept to embrace as you're moving forward is a process of I am all these things. And so she talks about it like us being a house with all these different rooms. And as we're growing up, we learn like, okay, this room, this aspect, I'm going to call it aspect is my term of it. So this aspect of me is good. Like I get what I want, which is maybe attention from my mother or my father or whatever it is. I get acknowledged because I hit a home run, whatever it is. Right. And then the other one might be, oh, if I act this way, I don't get what I want, or that I'm learning that this is bad. Or for me, it was like acting like a victim, with something that I saw that my father did not receive well and I was always seeking his approval and validation. So then I learned I don't want to be a victim, and I would shut that door and try to leave the doors open that I wanted to be seen as and perceived as, and shut the doors to the other ones. But when we talk about projections, which I would love for you to talk about a little bit, is those things that we may judge as bad as wrong, those aspects of us that exist in us that we've closed the door on, trying to avoid them, they just show up. And that's the beautiful thing in the outside world here that we live. The physical world is in that relationship or that job experience or school. It comes at us again, and it's like, and then we try to avoid it and change it. But really it's moving into acceptance and compassion, like outside of the idea of right and wrong, and having the compassion and healing with it to move through that. And so, what you're talking about right now, I feel like is an awesome expression of that.
Exactly, Danny. Exactly. The marginalized parts of ourselves will be reflected back to us.
So for the viewers, can you explain a little bit that, because we talked about it earlier in the mirror, right? And how that relationship becomes a mirror. Can you talk a little bit about psychological projections and how those work for those that might not quite understand that concept yet?
Sure. Well, this is such a huge part of everything we do. It's this law of projection, but I'll start with like the very first beginning. In the Enneagram, the wisdom of the Enneagram teaches about the law of one. And the law of one, think of like putting a pin and tying a thread to that pin. And then with your thread tied to that pin, you draw a circumference around it. Okay. So every point of this circumference becomes an image, a mirror of that center, because it's tied to that thread, and then the thread is going around and making the circumference. And so is creation. There is a center creator, and everything in creation, everything, you, me, everything that exists is one point in this circumference. And it's drawn because of that center point of the creator. If the creator wasn't there, there would be no points around, there would be no circumference. And so this is the ultimate understanding of the mirror effect on how we are made in the image of the creator, energetically speaking, with the idea of the circumference and the law of one. Now, the way it manifests in our lives is just like what we're saying. The way we know ourselves is by what we see in others, in other people, in other things, in other situations, in other places, everywhere around us. Become that dynamic of the mirror that happens in creation happens also inside of us. And so our marginalized selves, the parts in us that we marginalize, we not only do this within ourselves, we do this outside with society. We marginalize certain races or certain kinds of people. It's just a reflection of what we do inside. And so what those marginalized parts of ourselves become reflected back to us by others, by situations, by places we go. Now, how do we recognize that mirror? I think is the most intriguing part of it, because the mirror, this reflection can be very literal. It's like, I see exactly what I don't accept in me, or it can be symbolic or metaphoric. For example, in my marriage, for a long time, Mike has this, when he is in his defense mechanism, he becomes angry. He's like, When I'm in my defense mechanism, I go into a bubble, I withdraw. I create a bubble around me. Nobody can get to me. And so for a long time, it's like, what is the mirror here? Because he is going all angry and I'm completely in this bubble. I mean, looking at me, you think I'm very peaceful, but inside of me, there's no peace. I was just myself in this bubble. So what I recognize is that the mirror, and the Enneagram is a beautiful map of all of this. We all have different defense mechanisms. So his defense mechanism of anger pulled my defense mechanism of withdrawing. it's a different mechanism, but we are mirroring ourselves in our own defense mechanisms. Does it make sense?
Totally. And one of the things I became aware of it's also like bringing you aware of belief systems that you may have instilled that maybe or have an opportunity to let go of and to build new belief systems. And well, I think of it as like the outside, because we can shut those doors to the things we don't want, and we can try to create us this beingness of what we want it to be that's not authentic, right? I feel like the outside world that's the blessing, because that part we can't control. So it shines a spotlight right on that part of me that's like, I don't want to accept, or I don't want to believe, or I judge to be wrong, or I have a belief system how it should and shouldn't be. I call myself righteousness of, and then I attach a meaning like my ego attaches a meaning of what it would mean if you do that or don't do that. And then it creates this inner struggle and frustration when someone isn't behaving or responding the way I think they should be. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm always grateful of, like, well, as frustrating as it might be, thank you, because you're helping me become aware, because I could hide that in my life. I can design a world in a sense. It's a little harder when you're married and have kids, right? They're always there to remind you, but otherwise you can start to create a little bubble like you're talking about, of like it's where I call that more like being detached than unattached, right? To me, there's a big difference in being unattached to the outcome. Means I could be in that space, in that environment, and regardless of the response, I can be unattached to it. Detached could be like, I just don't care. I just make it so I don't care, so it doesn't bother me. Big difference.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is to be open. Every time we can see our mirror, we are expanding. For example, I had a client, he used to say, I have never had an experience of intimacy. I have never had a relationship where I felt loved. I felt any level of depth. His childhood, his parents, his whole life had been a series of frustration. And so for him to recognize, how is it that I have closed myself to that implicit memory inside of me that remembers the embrace, the protection, the love? How is it that I have shut off myself to my own essential vibration, and that now the world keeps reflecting it back to me? It took a long time to even allow himself to think of the possibility, maybe I really shut off myself to that implicit memory that sustains me alive here.
I love that. It reminds me of, is it Just Me? On page, I think it was page 90. Page 90. Will you read that one?
Just Me. Yeah, let me see what this is. Just Me. Oh, yeah. As a teenager, I dreamed of having 2 children, no more, no less. 1 will be too lonely, 3 would be 1 too many. As a young adult, I broke up many relationships for one reason: he will not be a good father to my children. That's true. I left my native country in search of finding a better place to build a nest for my babies. USA, the home of the brave, the land of the free. That is the place to raise my children, for free and brave they will be. The father had to present credentials, not only potential. He had done it before. A second rodeo, he says, he offered. I accepted. I saw his wisdom, his experience, talents, values, determination, persuasion. Above all, I saw a heart of gold in magical sexual attraction. Babies were born with golden spoons in mansions, the best school, the best toys, with all the best there is to offer. All of a sudden, I saw the fulfillment of my own prophecies. I connected the dots. It absolutely had to be this way because this has always been the way in my dreams, in my intentions, and in my actions. The children are shining bright in health, glory, with all the best there is. I see their father aging. I see myself aging. I see myself longing for myself, not my children, not the father of my children, just myself. No one else, just me. So, yeah, this is interesting. Like I said, I looked for that intimacy outside of me my entire life. And so part of it's like, oh, I'm just going to have the perfect family, the perfect children, the perfect husband. This is going to be all amazing. And then I'm going to find that intimacy.
Right. Oh,
Right.
I love it.
And it all came into fruition. I mean, we had an amazing, blessed life, exactly like I dreamed. And this is also, I think, a testimony to the power of our heart's desires. The secret longings of our hearts. They come true. They do manifest. But then, as they manifested, I realize it's really not there. Right. It's what I'm looking for. Where is myself? Where's me? It's not about the father. It's not about the children. It's not about the house. It's not about the mansion. It's not about any of that. None of that, really.
No, I love that. I mean, it's such, so often, often it's when we get all those things and then we're like, wait, but still, and then you're realizing like, oh, wow. Like you were saying before, there's nothing left to look but inside.
Exactly.
Reminds me of a friend of mine. I remember who was she was dead set. I'm going to be a billionaire. I'm going to be a billionaire. And God bless her. Like she was doing all the work to manifest everything she could. But there was after a while, I just kept realizing there's this obsession with, and I had to ask her. I was like, okay, so when you're a billionaire, how will that make you feel? What will that mean? Because I really felt like the exploration was she could ask herself is like, what would that mean about her? How would she feel? What would be the experience that she would be having as a result of being that billionaire? And then, so we explored that and I was like, okay, so why can't you be that right now?
Exactly. And there's no right or wrong here.
No, it's not nothing wrong with being a billionaire at all.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong being a billionaire because it is by getting there that we can see the next level.
Right.
Like each level takes us into the next level.
Right.
And that's the beauty. The beauty is to be able to trace, the origin story. This is what took me here, and this is what took me here, and this is what took me here, and this is where it's going to take me there. And what's my next level?
Right.
And that's the fun part. We all still moving on to the next level. And if we can do that more consciously every time, the better.
Definitely. So going back into your childhood, you're dealing with the struggles of the challenges with your brother and it becoming very normalized and the struggles around that. Was there another big shift that occurred?
Yeah, I just thought of it here, Danny. Just wanted to finish something we started.
Yes, please do.
The 3 skills for this journey, for breaking up the link of pain.
Yes.
Leadership. So one is self-observation. The other one is listening. And the third one is expressing. And expression is a lot more than communicating, the words. Like we were talking before. Expression goes far beyond words. And it is that presence. Like I said, when I grew up in dictatorship, like there is a sense in the air, there's a tension in the air. And so expression is what is that something in the air, inside of me, around me, in me? And what am I doing? What am I doing to create that expression? So these three things, self-observation, listening, and expressing, becoming aware of it and working consciously to tailor that.
So when you say expression, is that like embodying the, so you, what I'm wondering is like in a, forget the term, but in a way that I'm embodying, I'm creating that expression, that shift in expression than the way I've been expressing in the past. What would be in a way in which I could embody the shift in expression that's more effective than what I had been doing?
Yes. So self-observation and listening is going to give you great foundation, but I will give you a little summary here. Okay. Usually we express out of our thoughts, our emotions, and our bodies. We have an impulse, we have a desire, we go for it. We have an emotion, we are sad, we cry. We have a thought, oh, this is right or this is wrong, and then we act upon that. That's our habitual mechanism. There's nothing wrong with that, except that that's our autopilot. We're not conscious. It's doing it's running us. It's almost like if you have a car, there's the engine, let's say, is our thoughts, and the carburetor is my emotions, and there's these parts of the car, and these parts are you need these parts to run the car. But to the extent that I think I am my emotions, I am my thoughts, I am my body, I become that part, and there's no one driving the car. So expressing becomes a recognition that I have all these parts, but I'm not them. There's something else driving this car. And then we start self-observing and listening and recognizing the synchronicities of life. We recognize there is a presence here driving this thing. There are synchronicities here that I couldn't have put them together. Our origin story and connecting the dots will allow us to see synchronicities. And we recognize there's something else driving this car. What is that? And I call it the essential vibration or the essence or the soul, but it's a benevolent presence, because we can start connecting the dots on how this thing took me to this, it took me to this level, and you start connecting the dots. And so there's a greater trust with that presence that it's driving the car. And so we start sitting on the passenger seat. And on the passenger seat, you can have great conversations with this driver. You get inspiration, you get motivation, you get ideas. And you can also, connect. You say you have a dashboard there that it's flashing when the carburetor is not working or you need gas or something. And you can say, okay, hold on a second. You can step out of the car, go take care of the thoughts or the emotions or the body, with these parts of the car, so that they are all in place to continue running. But I'm none of them. I am not the benevolent presence. I am not the thoughts. I am not the emotions. I'm not the body. I am the one who's there, kind of holding everything together, integrating everything and listening to everything. And so my expression becomes one, like you said, detached or non-attached, because I'm recognizing I'm not that. I am a channel. I am sitting here as the passenger seat and just kind of connecting all of this together so this car can run. This car can run, perhaps not the way my thoughts or the engine or the carburetor would like, but it can run according to the guidance of something far greater within me, that benevolent presence, which is driving it.
Yeah, I love that. You reminded me, I've been deep on this journey, as you know, of surrendering to the divine unknowing. And as you're using that analogy, it's totally relating to it. And then I'm also having these thoughts of like that same car, and I am the driver, but I have a co-pilot, and the co-pilot knows how to get there, knows the directions. And as that driver, when I'm not listening to my co-pilot, I'm just figuring like I know where I'm supposed to go or how I'm supposed to do it and where I should turn right or left or whatever. However, when I'm cooperating, when I'm listening, like for me, it's been a journey of trusting self and trusting God. That's a big journey I've been on. It was like surrendering that, like meaning like letting go of the idea that I'm supposed to know. And how can I? And the reason why in this analogy I'm making myself the driver is because what I've realized is it's not just hearing; it requires action. So I'm hearing, I'm connecting with that inner guidance. I'm hearing that inner guidance, and I have to be willing to step in to that action, not knowing like I'm gonna turn right. I have no idea where that's taking me, but I trust you as my guidance, as you mentioned, that guidance. And then, oh, you want to go left here? You want to go right here? Oh, you want me to make a U-turn? And at no point, kind of like you were saying, back to the being in the womb, trusting, like feeling safe, like, and regardless of like, I turn left and then all of a sudden that there's a road closure or something. And where in the past, maybe I would have been like, oh my God, that's horrible. See, I made the wrong, I can't trust that guidance. Like, look at now I'm stuck at a road closure. Relating to it now, knowing like wherever I happen to turn and whatever bumps that come along the road were exactly the ones I was meant to have. And how can I cooperate with that and embrace that and find the blessing in those, what I might in the past perceived as, issues with the road.
Yeah, I love the way you're putting it. My experience has been that letting go of the driver's seat, that allowing that presence to drive,
right,
is it's scary. It's a whole new level of surrender for me. And which means to me is that the actions kind of will turn right or left. It is going somewhere.
Right.
And sometimes it even goes to places where it's like, oh, how I wouldn't go there, but it's going
not.
And so I'm completely okay with letting go of the driver's seat. And it's almost like, well, if I could choose, I wouldn't go there. But I know this benevolence presence knows better than my thoughts and my ideas. And it's got something else. And so there is a willingness to go check it out. Let's see. Let it drive. Let's see what happens.
So, Inly, when I'm hearing you speak on that, what it bringing forward with me is asking the question, like in the past, was there a deep desire to control things and where they went?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in my profession, in my career, in my marriage, particularly in my marriage, in the family, as a mother, I felt like I had to control these kids. The marriage had to be in this certain shape and it had to look like a certain way, until I recognize, I think that's a lot. That's why many of us get divorced. It's like, this is not what I want. And for a long time, my marriage was not what I wanted. And what made me stay was this idea that there is a presence here that has brought me here for a reason. I'm not in this marriage by mistake. There's a presence here that took this turn for a reason. What is the reason? What is here? And that was the whole journey into myself. That allowed me to go into how am I, to connect these dots, to recognize the wisdom of the driver's seat.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there was a poem I read that I experienced it as like that, and I reflected on my own journey of attempting to do things. I call it perfectionism, or trying to do it right. in my case, I was more worried about doing it wrong. That it wasn't about needing to be right. For me, it was like the fear of like being wrong and what that would mean if I was wrong. And I promise not to make you read too many more poems, but I would love for you to read Who Is It on page 48.
48. I love the way you're pulling them out because, I don't remember them until I go there. Who is it? All right. Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah, those are all right. Who is it? Who is it that yells at me to be perfect so that I can be happy? Who is it that tells me to be strong, independent, so that I will not need anyone else to take care of me? Who forces me to be smart, talented, pretty, unique, and much more so I can prove my worth? Who wakes me up at night to say that if I'm not the perfect mom, my kids will be screwed up? Who gives me ideals of eternal youth, beauty for me to achieve? Whose voices scream in my ears in the silence of the night? Voices of shame, guilt, unworthiness. Who are you? You hide, masquerade, then all of a sudden jump out of the closet when I least expect. I don't believe you anymore, but you still scare me. I know you are not even real. You're an illusion of my mind, yet you're still ugly to see. I know you're powerless, yet my mind keeps feeding you into survival. I know you come from someone, somewhere, doing the very best they could. The voices of my childhood. I know you come from someone's best attempt to live their definition of love. And I know you no longer serve me. I know you. Now, could you just move from shame into freedom, from unworthy into divinity? Could you just be one who does no wrong, who is inherently beautiful, who is a light shining bright, laughing for no reason? I mean, this was my request to all these parts of me, that were tormenting me. It's like, would you please, please, please help me go in a different direction? Because I recognize that I would need the endorsement of these parts of me so that all of us can go in a different direction. Not like I will hide these parts over here and these other parts are going to take me in a different direction. It's not going to work that way. I need these parts too that were screaming all of that. I need you. So it was I was like, please, come on, let's all walk together here. But I had to listen to them because for a long time, I didn't even want to acknowledge their presence.
That's beautiful. And it resonates deeply with me. I imagine anybody listening right now is that inner journey of moving into acceptance, unconditional love of all aspects of ourselves, and moving away from avoidance, disconnect, the making, the idea of right and wrong, good and bad. And the beautiful, I call the byproduct, is, and that's the part that's opportunity for all of us, it's like, how can we surrender the need to control, the idea that we need to be X, Y, and Z in order to be good enough, in order to be lovable. That's conditional love. If there's any parts of you that's like, well, that's conditional love. Like, and what I can tell you, and it doesn't mean you can't have a goal and work towards something, strive towards something. Surrender isn't not doing anything. That's not what these things, see, these are all still like more semantics that old versions of us could get stuck in. And it's just this opportunity to unconditionally love and embrace our original self. And the beautiful byproduct that I can assure you guys is that when you do that, nothing but shines out but more love. And you want to create the greatest change in the world, start inside here.
Exactly. And more than that, it's like, don't, and I want to say this to the audience, it's like, don't believe us. Don't believe us. Go check it out. Who is your original self? Who is your original self? And the farther I go, the farther I go inside of me is that place, that implicit memory of being in the womb as a one cell organism to multi-cells organism in this environment of complete safety, complete love, complete embrace, that it's forming me, that it's from within. So if you can just close our eyes and allow ourselves to step out of our thoughts, out of our emotions, out of our thoughts, out of our body, just relax all these parts of us. Relax the body, relax the mind, relax the emotions, and just remember us into that mysterious embrace of the womb. You know, the all amniotic fluid that we were swimming in. It's comfortable and it's cozy and it's warm. There is no cold or hot, you know, there's no change in temperature. There is just that embrace of the fluid around us, the womb protecting us. There is the perfection of creation taking place as each cell grows and transforms and informs the formation of the organs and the parts of us. And there is this great unity, this all whole, it's all one. It's all beautiful and mysterious and courageous. Each cell that is born and reproduced is the miracle of creation happening in us, as us, and through us. So as we go into this very, 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 very first memory of us, the origin of ourselves, we start recognizing there is a heart beating in me. I don't know who's beating this heart, but it's beating. In fact, my heart started beating before I even had a heart. Within 2 weeks of conception, there was a heart beating. So what is that rhythm inside of me? And that rhythm is creating a whole blood flow that is going through my veins and it's dancing around my body. What is that rhythm? And how can I identify myself with that rhythm, with that vibration? And from that place, allow everything else to relax, the body, the thoughts, the emotions to relax so that I can receive. What's my next thing? What's my next step? How am I gonna do the very next thing that it's right in front of me, right here, right now?
Wow.
I don't know if this was the time for us to go into a more experiential exercise.
No, I love that.
But I thought it important because this is not a belief, you know, it's not something that we believe intellectually. It's something that we go into ourselves, inside ourselves. We just go there.
You know, I'm going to read this one because it's easy.
Yes.
You wrote one called Discipline. It's one sentence, so I like it. But it's like, wow, I love simplicity in a way, because when there's so much that could be said and so little, and here it is, discipline. It takes a lifetime to learn to love life when it doesn't behave the way I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the first spiritual law of acceptance, and second, cooperation. I think a lot of what we've been talking about really comes down to that, cooperating with what is and taking dominion over our own experiences and how we relate to it, and how we can empower ourselves with that, and how we could consciously, you shared some amazing tools of how to consciously become aware and how to support ourselves in making those shifts. And I would love for you to inform our audience some on like how this journey of this life journey of yours has been this blessing in disguise, and how like the struggles and challenges have informed you. And you shared a lot of how it's informed you in loving yourselves more unconditionally. But can you also inform us in like how that has led you into creating the Institute for Next Level Leadership?
Yeah, I think the natural outcome, and perhaps the greatest outcome of divine intimacy, of coming into ourselves, is service. Because at least my experience has been that every time I connect with this vibration inside, it inspires me to do something else in the here and now, right here, right now. And it can be small. It can be petting my dogs, or having a conversation with my children, or smelling a flower, or it can be something big like creating a class, or setting up an online event, something a little bit. But every time I go into this vibration inside of me, there is a force that comes through that wants to share, that wants to give, that it's not meant to stay inside. It's relational. It's meant to relate to something somewhere outside of me. And so service becomes an outpouring of this inner connection. And it happens naturally. It's not that I have to, now I have to be of service. It's just like, I have to do something with this energy, and I have to allow it. It's kind of like giving the driver's seat. That driver's seat is it's guiding me into this something else for me to do right here, right now. And so I just go with it. And in that go with it, the Institute was born. I started by coaching. I started coaching in 2014 when I started with the Soul-Centered Professional Coaching Program. I started coaching then, and then I coached for 4 years pro bono, just as a hobby. And then after my journey of my divine intimacy, that's when I recognized it was the time for me to step into this. Actually, there was a fire in my neighborhood in 2018. It burned the entire neighborhood down. It was a scene of the end of the world in my neighborhood. My house was still standing, but the neighborhood, the friends lost their homes, and it was horrible. And it was a huge awakening for me. It's like, this is the time for me to stand on this service that I already feel I'm already doing. It's already here, to stand more fully into that. And so I had this vision of the phoenix, rising from the ashes. And so I start creating these evenings in my home, and I would invite a friend. I would invite a friend to facilitate the evening with me, and I would invite other friends to just come and receive. And of course, as we are giving, I'm receiving more than the people that I invited to receive, because it's one of the same. And from those evenings that I had with a few friends, then eventually Mike asked me, why don't we do an evening together on leadership? He had been in a position of leadership for quite a long time. I had been in a position of leadership and throughout my whole life story. So we start doing evenings on leadership. And from there, we started a program, and from the program, we started the Institute. And then within the Institute, some other programs were created, and that's how it took form.
And I personally want to acknowledge you and the work and the effort. I personally have done many of your programs with you and your husband, Mike Murphy, and co-founder. And I just would like to take this moment to just like thank you guys so much. The amount of heart and love and man, the amount of work that you put into the amount of information, the amount of content, and it's just unbelievable the way that you give back, being of service to those out there. And I would highly encourage anybody that's been felt inspired in any way today to reach out and connect with INLLE. She is more than happy to answer your questions. And you guys are, I mean, speaking about, I remember you invited us into your home,
right,
to do the
you
program.
were the first group of the Institute. Yeah,
Cooked
you're the
for
first
us.
graduating class.
And of course, you know, I got to bring up Mike Stew. You know, it's an Italian Irish. Is it the stew or the other one? I don't know. Anyways, I'm in love with that. But it wasn't just that kept me coming back. You guys are really incredible, and I see how much you're constantly innovating and how it's ever evolving, and your willingness to just not be a teacher, but to continue to be a student and to be continuing learning and shifting and adapting, because your focus is really on others and how you can impact their lives the most you can. And in the work that you do with the Enneagram is, oh my God, guys, if you can come back sometime and speak specifically, because the Enneagram is so like comprehensive, that you are unbelievable with your knowledge and awareness, and the work you've done with the Enneagram is amazing. And it was profound in the work that I did with it, and understanding and relating to the different aspects of me. And I don't know, I just love you guys so much. And I just really appreciate your willingness to come on. As speaking of being of service, you know, that is what, and that guidance is what's guided me to launch this YouTube wellness channel. You know, the very thing that the thing that kept circling around to me is when I was going through my darkest moments and darkest times, you know, 21 years ago, and not knowing what I didn't know. And I didn't know any of this stuff holistically, spiritually, personal growth, or healing wise. And it was a long, challenging journey. And I just think like, wow, how awesome would it? I wish I had a resource available to me. You know, then the internet wasn't like it is now. And now there's an overwhelming amount of information, and we don't know what to trust, it becomes, then you shut down or disconnect from that direction. And what I really want to do is create that resource for others that maybe like me, trying to heal mentally, emotionally, physically, and bring on people like yourself that I know are so authentic and transparent and trustworthy. And I assure you guys that Inly and Mike and the Institute of Next Level Leadership will enrich your life in an unbelievable way. So please, where could they go to learn more about that?
Well, we have our website, www.institutefornextlevelleadership.com. Feel free to go to the website, and then you can contact us there. We have an Enneagram program starting on July 8th until November, from July 8th to November 18th, I think, every Friday, 2 hours every Friday, online only. We're hoping to get a very intimate group, because then we can go deeper, and there's going to be coaching during the program. And after that, there will be other programs. And you
briefly talk about the Enneagram because we mentioned it several times, but I don't know if there's a brief intro to like what the Enneagram is and does.
Yeah. The Enneagram is such a fascinating body of knowledge. It has been kept secret for many, many years. And very recently, since the 70s, it become public. The greatest benefit of the Enneagram is the application in one's own life. And from there, then you can expand into your groups, your families, your teams, your organizations, and so forth. But if you haven't really done the work, you can't, there's no way to extend it out because it comes from that presence within. So if I could describe the Enneagram, if I could describe it in a simple way, I would say that, you know how you have the periodic table that lists all the elements of the physical world, okay? And then you put these elements in different combinations and you have all these things in creation, right? The Enneagram is the periodic table of energy. And then you put these energies in a different way and you create each one of us and everything that it happens in life. And so it's a way that we can start grasping and understanding energy. Now, I have to put a disclaimer here. Let's put a disclaimer here. And I heard this story this past weekend. I remember when my daughter was young, we would go to the beach and she was afraid to go into the ocean. You know, the waves and the ocean, she was afraid. So we would dig a hole in the sand and then she would grab her little bucket, go to the ocean, put a bucket of water and dump it in her hole. Go to the ocean, did that 100 times, you know, dump it in her hole. And then she would swim there in that hole until the water kind of penetrates into the sand and she would do that again. It's kind of like that. Energy, you know, creation, God is kind of like this ocean. It's mysterious, it's huge, it's magnificent. And it's a bit intimidating for us to surrender into this ocean, to go, let's just navigate into this infinite ocean. So what we do, we carve a little hole in the sand and we go there, we grab a little bucket, we put it in our hole and we experiment with, we get wet, we get, you know, we experiment what the water tastes like, what's the sensation. And we keep doing that until we get more used to the taste and feel of that ocean water. And we can then break out of our fears and come more fully into, okay, I'm ready to swim in this big ocean of the divine. And so the Enneagram is a little bit like that bucket, the hole we put on the side, and then we bring a little bucket and we experiment with the ocean, with the divine energy. And we learn how these divine energies come through us, as us, in us, the ways they become distorted, and the ways that that we can, again, experience them for the purity of what they are. And the more we experience these energies for the purity of what they are, the more we start swimming in this ocean with less resistance, less fear, less control, and creating a greater level of trust and comfort in swimming into this big ocean.
Wow. I love that. What a great analogy. And you know, my personal, just to add a little to that, like my personal experience with the Enneagram was like gaining so much insight on a conscious level to the aspects of me. And when I'm out of it, it helped me to become very aware when I was out of balance also. And sometimes it was kind of an interesting way of those things I found myself when I was really weak in certain areas. Those tended to correlate to certain aspects that I may have judged as bad or wrong. And so it was also an indicator of like, oh, there's some opportunities for me to let go of, you know, judgment or misbelief systems and to become more balanced. So I highly encourage you guys, please reach out to Inely. She's amazing. Oh, and don't forget, like this video, please like it. share it with people you know or anybody that you think it might be supportive for, and subscribe so that you get notified when new videos come out. New amazing people like Inely. In fact, your husband Mike will be on soon, so you guys are definitely going to hear his story. He's an amazing human being, beautiful soul. Look forward to that. So until next time, peace and love.